inclusive data engaging citizens, examining the state of open data and participatory governance, access to public information, evidence-based decision-making, and citizen participation in governance is essential for a sustainable future. To do so, harnessing the potential of open knowledge movements and enabling citizens to engage in matters of public reform is critical. Stakeholders from the Data for Public Good ecosystem come together to share their perspectives on how to better data-driven decision-making at scale. It is my privilege and pleasure to welcome on stage Mr. David Zamora, Digital Technology Consultant, Global Data Barometer, a passionate digital technology consultant and indexes expert. Zamora's work focuses on digital transformation, transparency, and open data. He is the international coordinator of the Infrastructure Transparency Index. We welcome you, sir. Next, we have Ms. Bernadine Ferns, Head of Sustainability, Infrastructure, and Asia at Open Contracting Partnership. She works to transform public procurement to deliver better outcomes for people, planet, and prosperity. She has designed and implemented multi-stakeholder programs aimed at transforming infrastructure investments to better serve those in need. We welcome you, ma'am. Next, we have Mr. Durga Prasad Mishra, Senior Director, IT, National Informatics Center, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. He has 30 years of experience in the field of cloud technology, web technology, and open data technology. He's one of the authors of the guidelines for the Indian government websites, GIGW 3.0. We welcome you, sir. And now we have Mr. Arjun Venkat Raman, Program Officer, Digital Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. His work focused on digital programs for gender equality, livelihoods, agriculture, and financial services for the poor. We welcome you, sir. This session will be moderated by Mr. Gaurav Godwani, Director and Co-founder of CivicDataLab. Over to you, Gaurav.
Thanks a lot, Riddhi, and a very good morning to all of you. Namaste. Welcome to the day 2 of CivicSabha. As we have been learning from the day 1, the access to open data is very crucial when it comes to data-driven decision-making, citizen participation, building trust in delivery of government services, and ensure there is more socio-economic growth in the country. And I couldn't have thought of a better panel than this. We have representatives all across here. We have David, who is joining us from the Global Data Barometer. Earlier, we had Open Data Barometer, and he would talk about how the journey from Open Data Barometer to Global Data Barometer has happened. We have Bernadine Ferns, who is going to talk about her journey of open contracting partnership and how she has been able to open up data at the Asia level for infrastructure, for public procurement reforms, and more. We have Shri D.P. Mishra, who is going to talk about his journey of making data.gov.in platform, the flagship platform of Government of India to open up a lot of data sets. And last but not least, we have Arjun, who's going to talk about how he has been supporting data reforms and how different AI models for public good could be built on top of the high-value data sets which are being opened up. So we would just get started. We would request David to begin with his remarks on how the Open Data Barometer is now transformed into a Global Data Barometer, and what are the learnings in terms of ranking different countries in their performance, scoring them on different key open data sectors look like. So I think you have a presentation for us where you would share some of these insights. So here's a clicker for you. You can probably take the dais if you're comfortable, or sit from here, whatever you feel.
Hello. So, good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here. It's my first time in India, so I'm very curious about everything, paying a lot of attention, enjoying the food, the culture. Thank you for being so kind. So, I'll be talking to you about the Global Data Barometer. This is actually a study that assesses the state of data for public good, which is pretty much on the theme of the event. So hopefully some of the information and data that I'll be sharing with you also brings good evidence for the discussions that we're having today and the upcoming days as well. So, all right. So the Global Data Barometer, it's an initiative that was released last year in 2022, evaluated 109 countries around the world. It evaluated more than 60,000 data points. All these data points are available in our website to download, and you can have those as open data as well. It evaluated more than 1,000 different data sets, again, around the world, more than 900 data governance frameworks, and more than 70 open data initiatives. These 70 open data initiatives represent the countries that do have an active open data initiative among the 109 that were evaluated. Okay, it's not moving. All right, so this slide is very important because it sets the framework of how data for public good is evaluated in the Global Data Barometer, right? So the barometer evaluates data for public good by disaggregating the topic into different subtopics. We call those pillars. So the first pillar evaluates the existing regulatory frameworks in the country, like laws, regulations, policies around data, right? Around data management and data use, pretty much the frameworks. The second pillar evaluates the capabilities in the country among the different actors to manage the data and then to use the data. Then the third pillar evaluates the data availability. Here we evaluate 17 different data sets among different thematic areas, and we evaluate the content and the quality of those data sets through all the countries that were evaluated. And then the last pillar evaluates how are we using the data that is available and the impact that that data is causing. So with this framework in mind, I'll be sharing some of the important findings that we're having. First, this slide is just to let you know which countries were evaluated in this region. There were 15 different countries evaluated in South and East Asia: Bangladesh, Cambodia, China, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Nepal, New Caledonia, Philippines, South Korea, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, Thailand, and Vietnam. Okay. Here you can see the performance of the region compared to other region and the top performing countries of the barometer. So the South and East Asia region received as an average total score of 33 points out of 100. This is a scoring scale that goes from 0 to 100. So illustrates that there is, like, generally speaking, in the region, there is a lot of track to cover in terms of achieving data for public good. The average score, the average score of the region, it is the same as the Latin America and the Caribbean, which is actually my region. I'm from Costa Rica, by the way. And we see some similar weaknesses among the different regions, even in the top performings, on the top performing countries. So you can see that the use and impact is consistently has a lower score throughout the countries. So what this is telling us is that we are still lacking of making useful impact with the data that we have available. Even though it has some limitations and so on, we're still having some issues to cause a good impact with the data that we have. Okay, that I wanted to say. Here you can see the situation of India. I'm not sure if the colors look well, but there is a red color in the center. That's the region, Asia, South and East Asia. Then you have India in orange, it's the second one. And then Korea, I just decided to include Korea as the top performing country in the region. So you could track or see a little bit some of those differences between India and the region and the top performing country. So you can see India, it's a little bit above the rest of countries of the region, of the average, but still behind, I mean, the top performing. And one curious thing to say here is that the use and impact score of India, like even though it's higher in the other pillars, it's lower in the use and impact. So this is telling us that there is some limitations in the country, again, to use the data and create impact with that data. In terms of data governance, and we look a little deeper of the challenges that the data frameworks have in the country, I wanted to share specifically results for India. So there are good things in terms of data governance frameworks in the country. So a very positive thing is that there is a open data policy that received a score of 90 points out of 100. Again, this is something positive, very positive. And then there's data management. There are data management frameworks that also got 90 points out of 100. That illustrates, again, a positive thing. But there are some negatives, right? The data sharing frameworks, it has 0 points. It means there's, at least by the time we collected the data, it means that there is no framework in the country for sharing the data. There's no framework for language data governance. And there are weaknesses in the data accessibility frameworks and the data protection law. Okay. In terms of capabilities, the positive things, there is an open data initiative that received 80 points. So it is an active initiative. It has a good score. Again, the 80 points don't mean that everything is solved. There are still some areas of improvement, of course, and I'll come to that in a minute. And also, there is good civil service training. Right? Again, it's 59 points. In the negative part of capabilities, the government is not supporting data reuse that much, as you can see. So there isn't strong direct initiatives. There are some, but with some weaknesses. That's why there's only 28 points in the government support for data reuse. And subnational data capabilities, also it's a weakness in the country in terms of the data management and the data use by subnational governments. Here you see the scores that India received in the 17 different data sets that were evaluated in the barometer. Again, these data sets are organized by thematic areas, but you can see that there is one data set that it received a very, very good score, 98 out of 100, which is the company register information. So that's very good. And then there is a big gap into the next one, which is climate vulnerability data. Like maybe on the top performing area of the country, of the data sets that are more available. And then you have data sets with, on the opposite side, they're totally missing data sets. Again, at least when we collected the data, you will update me later if this has changed. But carbon emissions data, as we were talking about data pollution yesterday, so it has 0. It means that we couldn't find that type of data in the country. And the other one is lobbying data related to political integrity. So those two data sets, for example, are totally missing. And then you can see, like, again, the general score of those data sets, it illustrates that there are important weaknesses in all the data sets in terms of the content, of the data that is included in these data sets, and also in terms of the quality of that data. And I want to just describe that with this last slide. So for example, we just saw there that company registered data is the most available data set, right? It had 98 points. Yet, there are some limitations in terms of the content of that data. For example, information about individuals' sex and the availability of that data set on official languages. It's a limitation in that data set. And then the second one, climate vulnerability data limitations. There's no data about future weather, climate variability, poverty, gender, and marginalized populations. There are none. The contribution, it's not possible with the agency owning this data for us as citizens, well, for you as citizens to contribute in the data repository. The availability of the data set in official languages also has some limitations. This data set is not openly licensed, and it's not machine readable in terms also of the structure of that data. Again, this was just a quick look at the results that India is performing in the Global Data Barometer. Again, to support a little bit this conversation of how we're moving to data for public good. You can see a lot more of results in the website there of the Global Data Barometer website. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, David, for giving us an insight about the Global Data Barometer and how the Asia region is performing compared to other countries and how India is performing, and some room for improvement for us. Thanks for highlighting that. I would quickly move to Bernadine Friends, or we call her Ben, as she prefers. Share more about your work at Open Contracting Partnership and how you have been building open contracting data standard, and what do you see the potential of it in global scenario as well as in the Asia scenario?
Thanks, Gaurav. Great question, and first of all, thanks, David, for that presentation. I think it's work that you do at the Global Data Barometer that really helps inform the work that we do, so I really enjoyed that. So first of all, what is open contracting? Some of you may know and some of you don't, so I'll give you a quick overview. So open contracting is really all about using the power of open data to transform public procurement for the better, and whatever that definition of better may be. And by public procurement, we mean any kind of government spending. So anytime governments spend money on contracts, whether it's pens and paper, water, services, infrastructure, that comes under government procurement or public procurement. And what we notice at Open Contracting, the Open Contracting Partnership, is that obviously there's a lot of money that goes into public contracts. Globally, $13 trillion is spent on public contracts. That's a huge amount of money. We know that there's a lot of leakage that happens as a result of that, like either because of mismanagement, inefficiency, sometimes corruption. It's not always corruption, but a huge amount of that is leaked. So we're really thinking about what we can do to make public money, so the money that you pay as citizens, your taxes and things like that, like how can we make public money work in a more effective and more meaningful way? So when we started this journey, we focused a lot on transforming procurement to increase the efficiency of procurements, to improve the effectiveness, to do things like improve competition so that there's a level playing field and that more companies or more suppliers or vendors get a chance to participate. So that was very much the start of our journey at OCP, or the Open Contracting Partnership. But increasingly, our partners are asking us to help them with global sustainability goals. So whether it's to make public procurement work better for people, so looking at all these social aspects and impacts of what we want in either better healthcare or better education, and there's lots of things that CivicDataLab worked on that front, but also on all things related to climate and environment. So whether it's to help reduce emissions, to help improve adaptation and resilience, or to do better things for the environment and other ecosystem services. And that then complements the work that we've been doing very much on kind of the traditional economic strand, so things like value for money and competitiveness and things like that. So that's largely what we do at Open Contracting and OCP. We've got a huge number of implementers now all around the world. It's recognized as a global norm, including on forums like the Open Government Partnership, OGP. We work with folks like the OECD and various, I think the World Bank, for example, is a great partner of ours. I know that Shankar was here yesterday, but maybe not today. So we're being implemented in almost 60 countries and governments all around the world now. In Asia, we're also seeing that growth. Asia is very much at the start of its trajectory and its open contracting journey. So we started our work about 2 years ago in Indonesia, where we're working on multiple fronts to do many things. So first, we're working with the national government to open up all their data sets. We partner with Indonesia Corruption Watch, which is an amazing civil society organization there. And we've opened up 14 years of procurement data sets and across the board, and that's increasing on a daily basis. On top of that, we're also applying indicators. So there are various open contracting indicators to help people make sense of the data. So data in its raw form, for most of us, it's meaningless if we don't know how to use it. So a lot of the work that we do is to try and help people to make sense of the data, and we have developed certain indicators that can help people understand what's happening in procurement. So again, what your bidding landscape looks like, how many bidders you have, how many companies are winning contracts, are there new companies entering the market, things like that. So that's the work that we started. And what we're doing now that I think is really interesting in Indonesia is that we're working with the government auditors, so the internal inspectorates, to help improve supervision, government supervision and oversight. And I think that's something that's very exciting for us because it's actually very new, and I think it's one of the examples of Asia leading the pack on that. So what we're hearing from our Indonesian stakeholders is that they don't have enough resources to obviously audit everything, right? And that's that's an age-old conundrum of sort of resources and need. And so what the government auditors are telling us is that they need to be able to target the way that they do the audits in a more strategic way. So how can they use data to help them improve the audit function? And so what we're doing there is that we're doing a lot of training for local auditors, for local government inspectorates, so that they can use our red flags for integrity or red flags for corruption indicators to identify those contracts that are potentially problematic, so that then they can target their audit efforts there, and then they have a better chance of understanding or finding if something is going wrong or right, rather than using a random sample, for example. So that's one of the pieces of work that we're doing. We're also working a lot on the complaints handling mechanism. So again, auditors respond to public complaints, and they have a duty to investigate when citizens like yourself raise complaints. There are a couple of problems there where the complaints mechanism is not very user-friendly, and so nobody was using it, and therefore the auditors weren't investigating. But there was also an issue there around the lack of joined up systems. So auditors, for example, don't necessarily have access to the complaint system, so they have to go through different departments to get that information and send it back and forth. So that's something that's really interesting that we're working on, to join up different departments, first of all, to build capacities of civil society and citizens to actually participate in this monitoring process, and then also to build the capacities of the auditors to be able to respond to those complaints and to investigate in a meaningful way using a data-driven approach. Of course, the work here in India that you've talked about, which is very exciting also, that we're doing a lot more on climate and particularly on adaptation and resilience, which I think is really exciting. And I think think again there, certainly India and our friends from the Assam State Disaster Management Authority are here, and they've been really again leading the pack on using data and joining up procurement data sets with other data sets of climate vulnerability data sets to make better decisions and to really understand what is needed and how to target their efforts so that the poorest and most vulnerable people are better protected. Moving further afield, so we've got programs now in, obviously in India and Indonesia, and the work in Assam actually has inspired our colleagues in Thailand to also adopt similar approaches on flood management and how to use data to improve the way they respond to floods in Bangkok particularly, which is also particularly flood prone. So I think that's very inspiring to see that the work here that CivicDataLab has started in Assam State has really taken off, and it's inspiring replication and adoption further afield. We also have a program in the Philippines where we're working with the procurement service there to improve the procurement of common use supplies. And then further, even in East Asia, we're doing a lot of work with South Korea, so it was great to see that Korea, as we know, are doing lots of really great things with data, and they're really leading the pack on that. So we're working on a story with them at the moment to showcase some of the innovations that they've come up with and how they're using open data and applying open contracting principles in their local context, and particularly how they're advancing on green procurement, which is very exciting. And then the last thing that I'll say on that is that we're also we had been working with Japan at the cities level, so through the G20 Smart Cities Alliance, where they've been doing a lot of work with Code for Japan to really build capacities for municipalities to do things differently. So that's a quick overview. I hope that was helpful. I talked a lot.
Super helpful, Ben. And I think we got a very clear sense of what other neighbors in the Asian region are doing and what can we learn from them. And it's good to see some of the things which we are doing here are going to other countries as well. So thanks for enlightening us with the benefits of open contracting and what we can achieve with that. Now we would go to Shri D.B. Mishra. You have been instrumental in initiating data.gov.in platform and opening up a lot of data there. And more importantly, enabling chief data officers, hundreds of them, in so many line departments at the national level. So what are some of your learnings from this whole journey? And as David pointed out, we need more reuse of data and more different kind of sharing frameworks. So what is your thoughts on that? We would love to know.
Yeah, thank you for calling this, and very learned panelists. I was just listening to Global Barometer as a journey that you have gone to global, open data to global. So we'll discuss more on this, whatever you have. As far as your question is concerned, what are the learnings and how we took a journey from nothing to data.gov.in. So data.gov.in actually we started during 2012. So it was a coincidence that we have been asked to suggest how to use open source to convert data.gov of USA to, because they were actually they were using a enterprise solution for releasing the data and all those things. So during that time we were introduced to how data can be released in open. So that time we started during, maybe it was end of 2011. So we on the 6-7 months we started developing a solution for USA, not for India in fact. So that time only we started to learn. There is a data stewards were there in USA.gov. They have designated that as a data steward. So in India, when we started this, we created this solution that there will be a CMS, there will be a a data management system, there will be a user management system. So once we did that, by that time it's a coincidentally, and India has also released its open data policy, that is National Data Sharing and Accessibility Policy. In that policy, they have mentioned that there will be a data.gov.in for releasing non-sensitive data in public domain. So who will release the data and how this will happen? Because releasing data means everybody was thinking that if you release data, people will manipulate the data and they will malign your credibility and all those things. But it is not like that. So we started drafting a guideline that how to contribute data onto the data.gov.in. So there is a multiple versions came up. What would be the structure within government? So we, in that multi-stakeholder consultation, we had multiple consultations, starting from central government to federal government to local government. Then that guideline was framed that what kind of data sets are to be released, what could be termed as non-sensitive data and what is to be termed as sensitive and not good for country type data, so which cannot be released in public domain. So that way we started our journey. That guideline really helped to start. In that guideline we term this particular person who is going to hold this position as data controller. So it continued for a year or so, but there was a conflict that data controller means somebody who is going to scrub, who is not going to release. So that way that term came up, there will be a chief data officer who will be releasing the data, who is the in charge of that particular ministry or a department or organization who is going to release the data in open format. There are clear-cut defined rule, terms and reference for them, what they should do, what they should not do. There is a do's and don'ts, what could be termed as open data, what is not to be termed as open data. The initial thought and that we continuing to having is any data released on data.gov.in must be machine readable. So we never used any PDF or any other data. So that Tim Berners-Lee's 5-star data principles, that is the principle that we adapted, at least up to 4-star. We maintain that all data must be 4-star. So that way the data has been is being released. The primary problem of data not being in continuation, or you can say that consistency of data release can be avoided only if you start sharing system to system, not a manual of data sharing. If you introduce manual data sharing, then if you are the chief data officer, you are interested, so you start sharing. If you are not interested, then the next person comes, he doesn't have this priority, so he will not share. He will just say, I don't have time, or I cannot see, whatever it is. They will, n number of police will come. So basin to machine data means you can decide your frequency, you can decide your the kind of data you are going to share. So that way we started enforcing that data must be in APIs. So that we started in maybe around 2020 or so, we started that way. So currently around 40-45% data sets shared on data.gov.in are through APIs only. So that is how the journey is. Currently I think 5-6 lakh record data sets are there. So Gaurav is also, we have been asking him to, because they are the person who understands the data more than we understand. So we have been asking them to just curate the entire data set and let us know how many data sets we should prune, we should remove if somebody is not giving on a regular basis. If somebody shared a data set on a particular month or year, then after that they have stopped sharing. So that kind of data set we should weed off. So because I also discuss with the data gov people. They keep doing this kind of cleaning activity. If some data is, anyway, data has a value. There is nothing that some data is there that doesn't. But if data is not compared with other data sets and data is not continuously given on a regular frequency, then it's not that much of use. So that is how is going on. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Shri TP sir, for enlightening us how the journey of open data has been from 2011, when we didn't have a policy, we didn't have a platform, to now where there is an active platform, there is a thriving community, there are a lot of government data APIs collated at one place. And of course, there is room to do more, and that's where this kind of conversations would help us. On that note, Arjun, what is your thought on strengthening the data ecosystem in terms of access, in terms of use, in terms of possible use cases which could be created, and how do you see the potential of some of these data sets being critical for hopefully a good AI system which would help us do better decision-making system?
Thanks, Gaurav. And really amazing insights from everybody else on the panel. So I'm going to pull some of those in as I go along. But I think before we get into ecosystem and enablement, I think important to nuance the context of open in different ways, right? So there's open for interpretation, which is largely what the barometer talks about, is data that's available for interpretation from a public policy point of view, right? So something which I could look at and say, hey, procurement, this is my preferred way of doing this, and therefore I can then make a push or a policy case based on past data available, right? So standard policy advocacy would rely on such data sets. And so that's one aspect of open that at least we at the foundation are concerned with, and so hence the Open Budgets initiative is part of that. The team that I'm part of looks at open in a slightly more sort of utility-oriented context. So I work with what's called the Digital and Health Innovation Cluster. So within that, I think the focus on open is more about, is the data open for use, in the sense that can this data be used to provide a public service? So for example, vaccination. Do I have ID information on individuals such that I can credibly claim that I have vaccinated a certain percentage of the population, right? So that becomes one utility, which is a public utility. Other public utility could be identifying yourself for the purpose of KYC. So that's your Aadhaar story, right? Then there is your authentication and sharing between different, from a transactional point of view, so UPI and all the related services. I think those are the use-oriented sort of connotations of open data. And then there's the open to build, which is where the AI piece comes in. So this would include things like binary data sets and images and voice or sound, which could then be used to train generative models or analytical models that are then in turn used to provide public services or commercial services or whatever it is, right? So I think those three different stages of open data are all relevant. As I said, we've done work with things like Open Budget on the first part, and where the opportunity presents itself, we continue to do that. I think our current focus has largely been on enabling things like digital public infrastructure, which actually allows for the flow of data for use. And there, the availability for interpretation piece is somewhat overshadowed by things like capacity for actually managing data at this scale, right? So how do you ensure that an individual citizen is able to access their longitudinal health record, whereas nobody else is? So both of those use cases become important. It's a governance problem, it's an implementation problem. There's capacity to be built in both. So there's those efforts that we get into a lot. And then coming to the last piece, which is for building and for the purpose of AI, that's an area we've just recently started exploring last year. One of the things that was obviously of big concern was that the data work ecosystem has been called out to be exploitative. There have been call-outs to workers having been paid less than minimum wage to do highly toxic tasks like moderation of content that's not appropriate for a public use. So those kind of scenarios were very much in our mind when we started thinking about AI. And then how do you solve for some of the market failure scenarios like a low resource language or an underrepresented anthropometric profile, right, for a computer vision scenario. So when you solving for these, you still need to create those data sets. You still need to do that data work, right? So how do you make sure that that is done ethically, it's done while protecting worker rights? So we've been experimenting with some of those models, example being a company called Karya Incorporated, who's got a interesting model where they pay royalties back to data annotators and dataset creators. So those are some of the new areas that we are now exploring into. That is it possible to build data sets that continue to give back value to people who own them and create them? This could mean things like data cooperatives. It could mean bringing other bodies apart from a private limited company into the data ecosystem, like a trade union or a cooperative society. So those are some of the interesting new areas that we are now starting to explore. And I think that is where the answers to your question about AI lie. If you're able to build these sort of ethical and holistic ecosystems around data and the supply of data, then correspondingly the applications and the use cases that come out of it are expected to be more ethical and sort of more valuable to society as a whole.
Thanks a lot, Arjun. I think those are some really crucial insights on how the whole data economy is changing and what role different actors can play in contributing data sets, and the definition of open means different to different people. So how do we make some sort of a consensus in terms of what open data means for us? I think with the G20 presidency, there has been a new focus on digital public infrastructure. And there is an agreement among the countries that we have to prioritize digital public infrastructure. And there was a working group on data for development, which looked into what kind of data sets we should be prioritizing. So I quickly want to hear from all of you, what is that one high value data set category which we should be prioritizing as country India, as well as Asia as a region? And why? Why do you suggest this over others? So we'd start from David, and then you can pass along the mic to others.
Okay, so it's an interesting question. So I will cheat on the results, pretty much based on what we learned from the Global Data Barometer. So as I showed you in one of the slides, there is, I think, a critical data set, data information that you're not having available, or maybe if it's updated, maybe you do now, but maybe with some limitations, and it's the carbon emissions data set. So if I would have to prioritize, you notice there that the score of that data set in India, it's 0, and this is a critical thing in the country. So I will definitely prioritize that one. Yeah.
Thank you, David. It's a great question. If I had to choose, if I had to say one thing, I would say also related to climate, but more around the disasters that are happening. So we know that climate change is real. As I said before, we know that climate change and extreme climate events, they affect the poorest and most vulnerable people. And that's why I think the work that we're doing with CivicDataLab here on the IDEA FRM solution on how we manage floods better and how we use procurement as a tool to better protect people is so important. And I think I know that CivicDataLab particularly did so much great work scraping a lot of the data and making sense of it, and that was a huge task. So as many of you know, there's data in all sorts of different repositories all over the world, all around the state and in India, and it was a huge task to kind of collate that data and make sense of it and standardize and structure it so that we can then get insights from it. And I think what would be really useful is a lot more of that data was more available, more accessible in a format that we can use, so then we can start to be more effective for the people who need it the most. So that would be my top pick. What about you?
So I will not say there is a one data set, there should be many. But as far as India is concerned, if you say, then I will, of course, will place for government contracting data. So a lot of things in India, it is currently if you see the works contract, It is the e-procurement system that yesterday I think you had a good session with Usha madam. So that data should be our priority. And as far as government marketplace, and you create a pencil, that kind of the commodity buying and that kind of thing you can do through a GEM, government e-marketplace. That data should also be released in public domain. We are in fact, we are trying to get that kind of data. She is also helping for releasing the contracting data. So these are the two data sets that is primarily required, and though along with that, budget data, if it is in open format, if you combine these two data, then you will get more insights on how India is progressing. We should start releasing that kind of data sets, of course, in the public domain. As far as this carbon emission and all these things, what I was saying, the Pollution Control Board has been releasing that data, particularly in various parts of India. So that data is already there on data gov. It's a API based data, and every 6 hourly or 4 hourly, I'm not sure, it is updating. So the current data of carbon emission and all those things, particularly in Delhi region, other pollution control boards are also, they are releasing the data. That data is available. We can discuss more on this.
So, I mean, can't dispute any of the climate data sets as important ones, nor the government procurement ones, right? But I'll just take the builder's perspective again, and I'll add a couple more, right? So I think there's the low-hanging fruit, right? Some very simple things like how do local governance district codes map to PIN codes? Something very, very simple. This is a particularly India-centric use case where we have government-defined geographical zones, and then you have the postal zones, and there's very little available information, even mapping something like as simple as that to each other, right? And where this becomes relevant is, say I'm building a very simple mapping or a supply chain or even tracking my AQI kind of an app, right? I want to tag my AQI to, say, a particular region. The government will expect me to do it to an LGD code, but what's easily available to me and what I would probably know about my locality is my PIN code. So if that mapping is available, making that link to from a user reported piece of data, like this is the air quality in my region, and then tying it to a policy friendly data set like a government data set which has geographical information, just that ability becomes possible if you have those mappings available in the public domain. So I think that's one sort of data set that I think is important. And then there's the high value, hard to create, expensive to create kind of data sets like language data, which you will be very hard pressed to find in languages like a Gondi or a Kui or a Kuduk, which are all indigenous languages spoken by very often 50,000, 100,000 people. Where is the incentive to start, or who has the incentive to actually collect those data sets apart from, say, the government of India? And so I think those are the areas where I would be really keen that there's more focus on making open data sets available for builders.
Thanks a lot. All four of you pointed out some very crucial data sets, and our audience would be really keen to engage with you folks to see how these data sets could be opened up. Now we would open up to the audience to ask any questions. As you can see, we have limited representation of women on this panel, so I would encourage more women to ask questions first and see if you have any perspective on what kind of data sets need to be open. Any questions you have for our panelists, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ramneek from IIT Delhi. So my question is, it's really commendable that data.gov.in is hosting so many open data sets for public use. But I was particularly interested in asking about the checks in place for validity of such data sets. So for example, for the NREGA data, okay, implementation of NREGA data. So open data sets are available regarding its implementation, but what checks are in place for that guarantee the validity of that data? That such and so assets that the NREGA officials claim were created. So were they actually created? And what was the asset, the decision for the assets, was it like fair, or was there elite capture, such things? So about the quality of data, of open data, that's my question.
Yeah, quality of data in open data, that is always a questionable, and it will continue to be questionable since many years going forward. So MNREGA data, I think it is not available in open domain. It is yet to come. So on data.gov.in, for MNREGA data, particularly if you search, you will not get. But of course, the MNREGA application, which is actually releasing, using which the payments are actually released directly DBT to the laborer's account and those things. That application itself is giving the data, but not in open format, of course. You have to select the state, district, then go to the village level, then you find all those details. You will get everything, but not an open format. And whatever data you are getting there, that is application generated data. So there is you cannot, nobody can question about that data, because on that particular person and everything is there within the system, and they are getting money directly account credited to their account. So that application is there. Our team is continuously engaging with the Rural Development Department to release the data. Recently, some good things happened, that they have not even declared a CDO since last 10 years, Chief Data Officer. So recently they have declared a CDO, and our team is working because they were ready to upload data sets on CSV format. They were ready to upload. Particularly, if you ask me, I said no to it. You create the API, then upload, because that's a continuously changing data. So even if they upload few months, it's waste of energy from both of, for them also, for us also. And over the period, we have learned that if you allow people to upload data, then that is the data that you are getting. So if you need on a continuous basis, invest some time with them, create APIs, integrate with the system, the data is open for your entire area. So they have identified 4 or 5 data sets, very good data sets they have identified. They have created, in fact, data in CSV format, but we said no to it. Let the APIs come, and you can connect with Achilles, is the person who is actually dealing with this ministry. He will give you the update on this.
Hi, I'm Noni, and I currently work at Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. And first of all, great presentation and great conversations right now. I learned a lot. But my question is to Ben. Basically, I know that you spoke about disasters and how open contracting partnership can sort of create data sets, and it could be linked with data related to disasters. So my question is, because we know disasters affect people very differently, especially if we look at gender. Women and children are very much affected due to disasters. So how would we sort of take that into consideration while looking at data collection? How do we reduce that?
Such a great question. I'm glad that you asked it. So the first thing I'll say is that we actually have an impact story that we published in collaboration with CivicDataLab on the Assam floods project. So I love your question, and that's exactly what we were trying to do in Assam. So obviously, as you rightly said, we know that disasters and extreme weather events affect people differently. And so the data model that we created in Assam looks at exactly that. So it looks at So broadly speaking, in a nutshell, so it looks at obviously the climate and weather related data so that you understand where floods are happening, what rainfall looks like, and things like that. And then it looks at vulnerability data, and there are a whole bunch of parameters, and we went from hundreds of it and whittled it down to 77, and now it's probably a few, maybe about 50 different parameters or so that looks at all the different parameters for vulnerability, including things like gender, age, poverty, things like access to infrastructure, because again, we know that access to infrastructure affects your ability to flee, as it does, your income status or your employment status or things like that, or whether you're women who have childbearing rearing responsibilities or caring responsibilities, things like that. So we looked at all of these vulnerability parameters. We put them into a data model to help us understand which are the areas that are most vulnerable. So looking at that vulnerability, and then we cross-referenced it with the government response, so looking at the procurement spend. So what's being spent where, so whether that's embankments or floodgates or flood barriers, whatever it is, so that then the Assam State Disaster Management Authority could then understand where they should target their efforts, and that already takes into account vulnerability. So it's not just looking at where floods are happening, but also looking at who is affected by it and who is most vulnerable. And I think that's an important thing about data as well, because if you don't look at, if you don't take a very holistic view of data, what can happen is that you might get perverse results, right? So when we started this work way back when, we started a collab with some of our colleagues in Taiwan, and there we were really looking at where the floods were happening and where the government response were. And that tells a story, but it only tells half the story, right? So you saw discrepancies like really high spend but really low levels of floods, or really high levels of floods but really low spend. And there might be good reasons for that, right? It might be because, well, maybe there's nobody living in those areas where there's lots of floods, and that's why the spend is low. And so I think as we learned from that, and as the data modeling became more sophisticated, we now have greater granularity and more accuracy, so that we can really understand right down to the village level what's happening and who's affected and who's going to benefit from the interventions. And if we can speak later, and I can share the link with you if anyone wants to hear more about that story.
Thanks, Ben. And I would like to highlight one crucial data set, which Ben also mentioned in her remarks, is FRIMS data set, Flood Response Information Management System, which was developed by Assam State Disaster Management Authority along with UNICEF in Assam. And they are releasing day-wise data set of losses and damages which are happening in Assam. This helps us a lot, and I haven't seen this kind of granular data for any other state in India, because this granular data can help you monitor schemes like how National Health Mission is being implemented along the same dates where the disaster was happening in that region, and what are the schemes related to maternal and child health, what is the expenditure happening during those dates. You can measure all of that. You can do a time series analysis to go to the nutshell that these districts require more attention, etc. And that's what we have been doing from a district to revenue circle level, create that local intelligence for action. But that's possible when disaster management authorities like Assam are creating those kind of data sets and publishing in open. And now we are working, as Shri D.P. Mishra suggested here, we need to have more APIs for making it more near real time in nature. So now we are working with them to develop some of these APIs to see this could be plugged in any data application anyone wants to build on top of it. We have probably time for one last question, and I think Pancho, you had your hand up. Do you want to go?
Was it? No, it's just, I was thinking of the data governance, because India is obviously performing at 0 point. What is missing, David, in India that you gave them 0 in that category? Because obviously they have data protection law.
So, can I please just put that slide? This one? Yeah. So, okay. Again, from the governance pillar of the Global Data Barometer assesses the existing frameworks, again, laws, regulations, policies, guidelines, all these type of documents that orientates how to manage the data, okay? So what the barometer does is to select a specific frameworks, and first it looks for those frameworks and then assesses the content of those frameworks. So what we see on the right side are frameworks that are existing in the kind of blue-green color, existing frameworks in the country with very good scores. And then on the other side, specific frameworks that are lacking. So yeah, there are 2 zeros there because there is no data sharing framework. So there's no regulation, no clear regulation on how data can be shared among different actors, like from government to citizens, from government to business. Like that should be regulated somehow, and there are some good practices on how to do that. And what the result is telling us here is that there is no such framework, if I'm not mistaken. and then the other 0 is that there is no framework that promotes the data to be available in the official languages, which is also something related to one of the comments that later was made here. So those are, let's say, the zeros representing frameworks that are not existing, and then the other are low scores of existing frameworks, but their content have some weaknesses.
So I think the data points for this assessment were collected before, like where the discussion was happening on data protection law, as well as data sharing framework. Now we have both of them in place. We have a data protection law in place, as well as we have a national data governance policy. Do you want to briefly talk about that policy?
See, what you are saying, national data governance policy, it is yet to be passed by the parliament. But the policy has been done. It is with the cabinet to, but it will take some time, maybe a month or so, maybe during the winter season it might come. But data governance policy is the next level of NDSA policy. Currently, it is still prevails, National Data Sharing and Accessibility Policy. Based on how come National Data Sharing and this NDSA come? It is the section 4.1 of RTI Act. So, Right to Information Act is there. It is in place starting 2006. So using that, you can get any kind of data. But of course, you may not get the machine readable data, but you can get whatever documentary evidences, everything you can get. On the proactive release of, in the section of RTI Act, there is a proactive release section, that is section 4.1. So on that basis of that section, this NDSA policy has been released. So what is that section says? If you are spending money from the government, and if you are generating any data out of that spends, you must release that to public. So that is the context, that way it is published. But yeah, of course, these things, the content of them, there will not be mentioned of any framework word as such, keyword as such. But the policy is still available, and currently DPDP Act has come. It's only August 2023 it has come. Digital
Data Protection
Act. On that act, there are going to be 25 policies are being framed now. How I will continuously do. There are many things. There are 25 policies are coming. Under these policies, then guidelines will come. And then people will start implementing. So the implementation might start maybe first quarter of 2024.
Just a quick remark. So this image is updated until around June 2021. So it's before that moment. And the good thing is that we will start, the Global Data Barometer will start data collection around June 2024. So we will probably capture all this.
No, see,
updated.
I'm sorry to say this. I have been part of many of these international organizations who rank countries in different parameters. So the main problem what I saw, it's not the international organization, they don't do that, I am not saying that. But the touch points and the nodal officers they engage or they may be using for collection of data is absolutely a challenge. Because they don't reach to the direct right person or right website, even if I don't know, maybe the websites and all those things, the platforms that we design, we create, the content we put, that may not be the right way, where the way they are thinking that it should be. That could be the reason, I don't know, that I think he will only be able to do a better gap analysis and let us know. Because in EGDI also, if you see there also the same thing, but when they rightly touch the person, rightly the particular ministry or any government entity or maybe the right person, then the rank substantially increases like that. So that is the one, but particularly for global data barometer, I will request you to contact right person.
We will partner with them.
He will represent, no problem.
So on that note, like more partnerships for more data indices and collaboratively working on improving our rankings and rankings of others together. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Gaurav.
Hi, Sachita.
Hi. Thanks, Gaurav, and please excuse my voice. So, I would like to use this platform to share that CBGA with technical support from CDL, we have also developed Open Budgets India portal, which provide budget data in open form, and also further step ahead, sorry, making it accessible and usable for citizens. So among various challenges that we face, and Gaurav would maybe want to add on this, two challenges that I would like to highlight here is that though budget data is available in open format, and I mean sir has talked about it also, but programmatic and schematic data is still not available in open format. And when we go down to states and further down, even the formats of the data in which it is available also differs. So it has been struggle for an initiative like OBI to put all this data first, like collate it in one format and then present it in an open version. So if something can be done or is being done in that aspect. And also the format of budget data also keeps changing from time to time. So if we can also kind of, some initiative can also be taken to kind of maintain that uniformity, so that the data's continuity is also like, is not challenged, and data can be made available in similar formats in a continuous manner.
Data standards.
Yeah. See, particularly if you see the budget data, we in fact also having a challenge. They normally publish the data. There is a different separate website for budget, but you will find sometime it is a PDF, then sometime it is a Excel sheet, and that too Excel sheets with merged cells and all those things. So I will say that we have failed to convince them. I can, but the way you are doing for open budget data and law and justice data, it's a tremendous thought. You are putting manual effort to get that kind of data cleaned up and put it up for public use. So it's a commendable job. If you see ask or question me, we will not be able to help you in that matter, how you, and we will not be able to support you that what you are doing is good. But I can say, whatever you are doing is very good. With the data.gov.in, we were not able to take those data. If you see that way, in data.gov.in also, there was a committee to was constituted to see that how data released from civil societies and private organizations can be contributed and collated in a single place. Suppose he is doing budget data and this fellow is doing some same budget data of various states maybe, he is doing for central government data, and somebody is, the government sources they are giving in PDF files or maybe Excel files. So if somebody can collate everything and do that kind of vision was there with the advisors that were started with data.gov.in. We have constituted a committee to see the governance framework, how private data can be put in under data.gov.in. But somehow it didn't happen, so we could not do it. But now we have developed a India data platform. That's a new initiative of government, where that is primarily a data exchange with all stakeholders. On that umbrella platform, it is mandated that any civil society, any academia, whatever research data, everything we can put there. So data, if that is of quality data, then surely we can have at the minimum we can catalog those data so that people will not struggle to find a particular data in contributed by various stakeholders. So that is actually coming up. Maybe in few months, a couple of months, I think it should come to the public.
So on that positive note, where we would see India Data Platform coming in a couple of months from now, there would be an opportunity for all of us to strengthen data for public good together. Thank you so much.